Michael Connelly was well on his way to following his father's footsteps while studying building trades at the University of Florida, when the novels of Raymond Chandler forever altered his course. The bleak and gritty Los Angeles landscape of Chandler's novels called Connelly first towards a writing career, and ultimately to walk the same streets, explore the same neighborhoods, and write about the same dark beauty that is the City of Angels. After stints as a staff writer at two prominent Florida newspapers, Connelly landed on the crime beat for the Los Angeles Times, where the seeds for his first novel took root. His debut, The Black Echo, featured Connelly's signature character, Hieronymus Harry Bosch, and won the Edgar Award for the best first novel from the Mystery Writers Association of America. This success encouraged Connelly to give up his award-winning journalism career and focus on writing novels full-time. 35 titles later, Michael Connelly continues to set the standard for crime fiction. His novels Bloodwork and The Lincoln Lawyer were adapted for the screen, and his most famous creation has been adapted into the acclaimed Amazon television series Bosch. In his latest novel, The Law of Innocence, Connelly returns to another of his beloved characters, Mickey Haller of Lincoln Lawyer fame, for a case like no other, where Haller is defending his most important client yet, himself.
Hey, I'm Michael Connelly, and you should be watching The Crew Reviews.
Gentlemen, let's raise a glass and welcome Michael Connelly to the show.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome, sir.
Here, sir. First of all, thanks for joining us. Your latest release, The Law of Innocence, Mickey Haller, the famous Lincoln Lawyer, is back, and he takes his most important case with his most important client. Could you give us a little overview on what's in store for readers?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I always look at books as like, the structure is like a slingshot. You pull something back and then you let it go. This is a real quick one. What it's about is it comes out really quick. Basically in the first chapter, Mickey Haller's pulled over by the cops and they find the body of a former client in his trunk and he's charged with murder. And none of that's a spoiler because it happens in the first chapter. And so, this book kind of tests the old adage, I think it actually comes from Abraham Lincoln, that an attorney who represents himself has a fool for a client. But Mickey's charged with murder. Stakes are extremely high. He also knows that he not only has to defeat the case in court, but in the world of public opinion. So who's he going to rely on? He's basically the best attorney, the best defense attorney he knows. So he defends himself. And I think the big challenge of the book is that, Mickey's made a fair number of enemies over the years. And he comes up before a judge. This is all backstory. A judge that he's crossed in the past. He's crossed in the past, and so he hits him with a very high bail that Mickey can't meet, or he could meet it, but then he realized it would impact the rest of his life and what he can leave his daughter and so forth. So. He doesn't get out of jail. And so the challenge here is that he has to defend himself with a murder charge, the most difficult thing that he could face. And he has to strategize and build his defense from a jail cell. And, of course he has people working for him and working with him, but he's facing that challenge. I was facing that challenge as the writer of having my protagonist basically in a jail cell for a good part of this book. And so that's what he has to overcome. That's what I had to overcome as a writer. And so that's basically how it starts out.
The one thing about that is, as a reader, I was wondering that every single page that he was incarcerated. I was wondering, okay, how is he going to get around this? How is he going to, when's he going to get out? How is he going to get out? And I mean, it really kept the pages turning. So the fact that you had to think about it as a writer is probably probably how it manifested itself. Whereas the reader, I kept turning pages until he got out, until I wanted to see him get out or figure out how he's going to get out.
Yeah, I mean, the book presented from the writing standpoint. I mean, this guy, he's been in other books. There's been, I think, 5 specific Lincoln Lawyer books before this, and then he showed up in a lot of the Harry Bosch books. And, so I'm thinking, or I'm knowing that a high percentage of people who read this book have already read about Mickey Haller, know this character, maybe they saw the movie. And so I don't have the did he do it question, did he or did he not do it? And that's what we're going to find out. I had to write this as if people mostly knew, hey, this is a series of books. The guy didn't do it. That's no big surprise. So to me, the challenge was, and what I hope kept readers involved was not did he or not do it. He says in the beginning, I've been set up. And I think the readers are going to believe that. And so it becomes, how do you get out of this box? How do you get out of the cell? How do you win the case and win it convincingly?
Yeah.
And, so that was the other challenge. I mean, I've written, this was my 35th book, so I've been down the path. So I'm always looking for a new way of giving myself the challenge. And so this one, it was, okay, the protagonist is in a jail cell. And it's not the very simple did he or did he not do it. It's more like, we know he didn't do it, but everything is stacked against him. How does he defeat this?
Right.
Michael, was that the thing you were thinking about as you were, plotting the idea in your head, that he's going to be stuck in jail before and being able to defend himself, that, the bail is going to be set so high? I mean, was that like central to your plot?
Yeah. I mean, before I wrote anything, my idea was he'd never get out of jail except for when he was taken to court. And so there'd be basically 2 locations. And then I can't remember exactly. I reached some difficulties and so forth. So there is a period in this book where he does get released, and then not necessarily underhanded, but the prosecution goes down this path that is legal. It's just not fair to get back in jail because, everyone wants to win their cases, and the idea of finding the truth is most often secondary. At least it is in this book and in Mickey's world. And so they know he faces quite a big handicap if he's not free to move around and work his case. And so they want to hold him in jail, and they stand up and say, because he's a flight risk and he's a danger to the community and all that stuff, that they know as they're speaking that's not true. What they want to do is handicap his defense, and the best way to do that is to keep him in that jail cell.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned that he was the best person, the best man for the job, for defending himself. But is there anything about Mickey's makeup that makes him the wrong man for the job?
I don't know. I mean, it's not like a case that everything goes his way. There's setbacks and things like that. And, I started out by telling you guys defying the Lincoln adage, but in a way I'm not, because he ends up having some really good people working for him, including his ex-wife, who comes across from being a prosecutor to help with his defense. And so in a way, he's got a great attorney, and he knows, and it's an attorney who knows all the ins and outs of the other side. So he's smart enough to say, I have to have a big hand. I have to strategize. I have to be the quarterback of this defense. But, if I have to hand the ball off, I want to hand it off to, Emmett Smith or someone like that. He's smart enough to surround himself with good people. And then, of course, you have Harry Bosch even contributing to the defense.
Yeah, which is a great segue to my question, is when you created Mickey Haller, did you already have the relationship in your head to Harry Bosch from the get-go, or was that some sort of serendipitous moment of kind of self-discovery?
Yeah, in some ways it looks like this master plan, and it's not. When I wrote the first book, The Lincoln Lawyer, I write about investigators, cops, reporters, FBI agents, and so forth. I was firmly ensconced in that side of the justice system, but I've always liked courtroom thrillers and all that. And then I was presented with a great idea. I met a guy who actually a lawyer who worked out of his car and was good at it, not because, he was a failing lawyer and had to work out his car. He did it because it worked best for him. And when he explained all that to me, I knew that could be a good book. But I also knew it's not really what I do, but I'm going to try it someday. It was like 5 years later before I wrote the book. And I just thought it was a one-off. But as I got Haller's voice, his first-person story, so it was a very personal voice, I just realized, I don't know, halfway through, 2/3 through, I like this guy. I like his voice, and I want to keep that voice. So I think I'm going to come back to him at some point. And so, by the way, are these long answers okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what this show's about. This show's it's not a short answer show.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to bring him back. I know that, and I like the idea of my books being connected, because up to that point, there was either subtle or big connections with all my books. I could say they're all part of the same mosaic. There's links between books like Void Moon and Harry Bosch, the Jack McAvoy reporter books. There are links. I linked all my books, so I started thinking, what's the link I could do on this one? And that's when I remembered that way back in my second book, where I have like a 3-page, not a flashback, but Bosch is driving to Mexico, and I kind of filled in the 5-hour journey by him recalling some of his past. And I revealed that his father was a pretty famous defense lawyer that he only met once. And when he met him, he went to see him. He had cancer and was dying, and he went to see him at his home in Beverly Hills. And while he was waiting to be admitted into the room to meet his father, he saw a little kid playing in the other room. So he knew he had a half brother. So I just recalled that scene, then went back to the book and read it to make sure I had it right. And I just saw, well, that little kid, if he grew up to take his father's, kind of following his father's footsteps in the criminal defense, that could be this guy, this Lincoln lawyer. And then I would have a secret connection to the other books through Harry Bosch.
Wow.
So it looked like I planned it way back with my second book, but that book's not really.
That's awesome.
Mickey and Harry's connection is pretty interesting, to say the least. And they look at the legal system through two very different lenses. But they each have strong codes but they don't always adhere to. Like, for instance, I would argue that Harry gets a little bit off track in this one. But do their respective worldviews represent some sort of dichotomy within your own thinking, like two ways you look at the justice system, or do they just represent two different archetypes that you observed during your time as a journalist?
I think it's more the latter. I guess because I'm a journalist or was a journalist, and you have that kind of built-in impartiality, I could always appreciate what both sides did, and whereas the actual sides don't appreciate each other, they're suspicious of each other, and I always thought, like, I'm the observer who sees both sides of these. With the Bosch thing, I mean, they do have different worldviews, but I think they're closer together as both of them have, through experience and, and age and so forth, see that the world is gray. I mean, in the early books, Harry Bosch is certainly a black and white type of guy. He views the world and good and bad and all these things. And as you go more through the series, including that book you just held up, he moves into the gray world. He understands it's a gray world, and there's reasons for what people do, even if there are bad things that they do. And so there he's kind of like getting into the same worldview as Mickey Haller. I mean, on one hand, Mickey Haller's idealistic, and he believes in the Constitution, that anyone accused of a crime is allowed to test the system, with the best defense possible. And that's very idealistic. But he also knows that, most of his clients are guilty of something. They may have been overcharged, but he has a sympathy for them because he understands, I think, the social implications and so forth that lead people to commit crimes. And on occasion, like the first book, and he comes up against pure evil, which kind of throws all that kind of understanding out the window. But I think since the first book, he has had clients that he comes to understand why they did what they did, or so forth. So I think they're closer than most people give them credit for. I think the quick thing is to say one's a cop, one's a defense lawyer, so they can't have the same worldview. But in a way, I think they kind of do.
Yeah, no, I think their worldview has grown similar as they've grown as characters. But I think the lenses which they look at, I mean, Harry's looking, his unwillingness to work for Haller in certain realms because he's just not going to work for the dark side, so to speak. It's been kind of fascinating to watch how they've softened. They're still very, steadfast in certain core beliefs, but they've softened around the edges a little bit. And I think that's kind of where they've kind of come closer together.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Michael, even though there's some character crossover, you've authored 4 distinct series. You got the Bosch books, you got Jack McAvoy books, you have Renee Ballard books, and Mickey Haller, of which The Law of Innocence is the latest. When you are planning your next book, what drives your choice of which character or series is going to be next?
It's kind of all over the place. So you just kind of follow your instincts. And it's weird. It's hard for me to explain it. It just sort of comes to me. And different things have brought them on. My previous book, Fair Warning, was a return after many years, I think 11 years, to Jack McAvoy, the reporter. And, I'm a former journalist, so, what was going on in the country in terms of growing suspicion, distrust of the media, really bothered me. And, I write fiction. I was never covering politics or anything like that as a reporter. But, I'm a reporter at heart. And so that bothered me, that hurt me, that so many people were viewing, reporters and so forth as enemy of the people, that kind of stuff, fake news. That really hit me. And that was really the thing that made me say, okay, I'm going to bring Jack McAvoy back after, at that time, 10 years. And write about him, and I'm going to just write about a guy who's an undaunted truth seeker and shows the value of a good, honest reporter, and that can be my contribution to this debate about whether media should be trusted or not. That's where that came from. I have to admit, I wrote this book, or I timed this book to have a Lincoln Lawyer book out now because I was supposed to have a Lincoln Lawyer TV show, but it got canceled because we were 3 days from starting to film it.
Oh.
And COVID, the pandemic hit, and we got shut down, and then we never got restarted. And so, but I had already written the book, so here we are.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of a crass reason, but at the same time, I love the voice of Mickey Haller. And he's appeared in several Bosch books, Bosch and Ballard books in recent years, but not in this first person form. That is what I love most about the series, because I've always viewed the Haller books as confessionals. In fact, the first book, The Lincoln Lawyer, I turned it in with the title The Confessions of a Lincoln Lawyer, because it's like him. This is a guy who has a lot of experience in the justice system, in the what would you call it, like being in the trenches of it,
Yeah.
of the machinery of the justice system, and he has experience and a viewpoint. And I viewed the series as him whispering to the reader, you know, you think you know how the system works or how it's supposed to work. Well, you know, get into Lincoln with me. We're going to take a ride. I'm going to show you what it's really like. And I love that aspect of that series. And I somehow gotten away with it. You know, I started the Ballard series, and the next thing I know, it had been, you know, 9 or 10 years since I had, 8 years since I had taken that voice and that first person voice and used it. So I wanted to do it, but at the same time, I knew it was going to be timely or work time wise with a TV show about this character, and then the TV show never happened. So
Right.
so anything can spark a story. So
You
just
write.
got to be open. You got to be open to the, you know, the inspiration of it, and it, you know, it just can come.
Yeah, I was just.
Oh, wait, hold on. So Donald Trump was the inspiration because of the fake news, or for McAvoy coming back?
Well, I mean, he's at the top of that pyramid of beavers in the media.
Right.
Not to be political, but
So
Yeah.
you can put that in there. I mean, yeah, that's part of it. Sure.
You write the Howler books in first person, and majority of the Bosch in third. You had the Lost Light and the Narrows; they were both in first person as well. But as a rule, Harry's in third person. Is there something specific to each character that drives that decision, or is it driven more by the kind of the respective plots you build around each?
It's more about the character. Well, also, you know, the first book, Bosch, is third person. I didn't really know anything about anything at that point. I can't remember why I decided that, but what I like about Bosch is that, you know, he's in a world that's very familiar from television and other books and so forth, solving a case, and I never want the reader to know exactly what he's up to. You know, he'll like do some observing, or he'll do some questioning, he'll be doing these things, and then it comes together. And I think that's a thrill for readers when they take all these parts, weren't sure what he was doing, and then it comes together and it's like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do with Bosch. And you can't do that in first person, because if you're not telling the reader everything, then you're cheating the reader. And with the Lincoln Lawyer, it was like I just told you before, I wanted him to say, hey, you think you know what it's about? This is how it really works. This is how our system works or doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I just viewed that as a first person. I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm going to tell you the good and the bad. And so that's why I went with first person with him.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, sticking with that theme, the vast majority of the narrative of the Bosch books are told from Harry's perspective. I mean, you pretty much stay with Harry. It might be my imagination, but it seems like since the TV show, where you're forced to show other perspectives, that some of the latter Bosch books kind of have played around a little bit with other points of view. Did that TV show impact your books that way, or is that my imagination?
No, I think that's a direct impact from the show. You know, when we were making the show, the showrunner, Eric Overmeyer, who's the creative boss of the show, said, you know, we have to spread the storytelling out. Just because of the basic fact we can't have the actor, whoever is going to be Harry Bosch, we can't have him working 16 hours a day, 5 days a week. We'll kill the guy.
Yeah.
So we have to spread the story out. And so that's why, and so we started doing that in the show, and we gave a character like Edgar, who is, you know, almost forgotten in the books, very transparent, for one-dimensional in the books, and he is a pretty full rendition in the show. We really built an interesting, I think, and full character out of him, and that came out of, you know, this is how you do television. You spread the storytelling out.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a writer, I should be a sieve. Inspiration comes from all directions, and I think that has certainly influenced me. So, you have Ballard and Bosch working together. A more recent book had Ballard and Bosch and Haller in it. So I'm spreading the storytelling out in my books as well.
Has there been any other impact of the show on your writing that you were conscious of?
I'm probably thinking more visually when I'm writing the books. To me, it was a hard transition from going from writing books for at least 20 years to when I started being very much involved in the writing of the show and the creation of the show. And, I was so used to that element of being inside Harry Bosch's head, which you lose immediately as soon as you start writing scripts. You can't put in what someone's thinking because it doesn't show up on the screen. Yeah. It's what they're doing and what they're saying. And so those muscles, I think, start building because that's what you have to rely on. And I think that, again, comes back to the book writing, where I'm thinking more visually. I'm thinking of, Bosch is not so sedentary. He's on the move a lot. And of course, I've always thought dialogue was extremely important. So it's not like I was giving dialogue short shrift before, but I think I hit it with a hammer even more since I've been working on the show, because so much about it is dialogue.
Speaking of dialogue, before you came on, Michael, Sean and Mike and I were talking about your dialogue in the books, and it's I made a reference and I said, I want to be a fly on the wall when Michael's having the conversation where he's writing out dialogue, and is it a conversation inside your head, or is it something, because your dialogue is amazing, it's so good, it's so crisp, it's clean, it's real. Are you having that conversation in your head, or is it you're speaking it out loud and you're playing both parts?
I don't. I've done that. It's rare that I do it though, that I speak it out loud. It's just I guess I just hear it in my head, and I think that came. I was a newspaper reporter for 14 years, and I covered crime, and which is always kind of like the unwanted stepchild, or whatever that phrase is. The red-headed stepchild of a newspaper. People read newspapers for the crime stories, but the people who edit kind of despise crime stories. So tawdry, it's the gutter, and so you were never given enough room for your stories, even if it was the lead story, and everyone knew this was going to be what everyone reads the next morning. You just never given enough room, and so you really develop this ear for dialogue, because every word is going to count in a newspaper story, because you don't get enough words, you don't get enough space to tell your story. So you listen for a dialogue that contains information. It's not just fluff. It advances the story through dialogue. Yeah. And that's something I learned on the newspapers, and I take it into my books. And what's fantastic about my books is I get to make up the dialogue. As a reporter, I had to wait for someone to say something smart.
Right.
It didn't always happen.
You should have said this, you bastard.
Yeah. Do you mind if I say that you said this?
Well, Michael, you've had a lot of your work adapted for the screen or television, beginning Blood Work, then The Lincoln Lawyer starring Matthew McConaughey, to the fabulous Bosch series on Amazon. With Bosch, you are in the writing room and you have a lot of input into the show. I imagine it's a thrill anytime your work is adapted for film or television. But now that you've had that experience with Bosch, will you be comfortable not having a seat at the table with your other projects?
Not really. And a case in point is, I've seen the light. I've seen how it can work. I mean, I'm very proud of Bosch, and I'm very proud of my contribution to it. It's not just I wrote the books and said, hey, good luck with it, guys. I said, I'm coming with the books. And TV is more susceptible to that, or agreeable to that, because it is a writer's medium. On a TV show, the writers are in charge, the directors look to the writers. And of course, in film, it's the opposite. But I do have, enough leverage now. And I have had, as you said, I've had some stuff made. I've had that wonderful experience and that ego inflating experience, whatever you want to call it. I've had it, so I don't need it anymore. So I'm only going to do it if I can do it my way. And so, for example, I had a book come out earlier this year called Fair Warning, and it has a high concept plot to it. And Hollywood came calling for TV and movies and so forth. And since I've already got a TV show going, I wanted to hold out and see if I could get a movie deal. But I wanted to see if it was a movie deal where I got to write the script. And so that's what I ended up getting, and that's what I'm doing. Now, of course, I know when I have the script done and an edit and we get a director to sign on, that director will be in charge of it and be the boss and be the creative boss, and I understand that. But at least I've had this involvement that the baseline story is not a book that some other writer has taken forward to a director. It's me. I'm writing that story. I'm going to hand it off to the director, and I'm also a producer, so I'm going to have a say in everything along the ways. I won't have the final say.
Right.
Technically, I don't have the final say on Bosch, although on Bosch, people don't want to disappoint me, so I kind of have the final say without having it legally or contractually. I know that won't happen in the movies, but hopefully I'll have enough control through scripting that it will work out.
Yeah.
Something that occurred to me today and just kind of popped into my head. So I'm always fascinated when a best-selling book is adapted and it doesn't resemble the source material at all, because it already has a built-in audience of people who love it. There are some changes in the Bosch's, from book to TV, but they're not changes in spirit, and they're improvement. Like Jerry Edgar being who he is, Irving being who he is. Those are, in my opinion, refinements and improvements, but that you've been a part of. I'm wondering, do you think it has anything to do with the fact that Amazon Studios is connected to Amazon book sales, and they see, hey, this guy sells a lot of books. Let's freaking stay to the spirit of the books. Do you think that has any bearing on it?
Yeah, a big bearing on it. And I have to say I was extremely lucky because this was their first drama.
Right.
Amazon, I know Amazon has all kinds of shows now and movies and all that, but they didn't 7 years ago. They were just coming out of the gate, and they chose Bosch as their first drama. And it wasn't like in a vacuum. It wasn't because I went in and pitched them and they were wowed by my pitch. I never even pitched it. They knew that through a connection in publishing, they knew that rights to the Bosch books had reverted to me, had come back to me after many years of being at Paramount Pictures. And I had the rights, and I was looking around, and we had moved into this, starting with maybe Twin Peaks and then Sopranos and then Treme. When I got the rights back, I didn't even say to my agent, let's look for a new buyer for a movie. I said, I don't want to sell this in movies. I want to get a TV show, because that's where the creativity is, and that's where the character-driven stuff is.
Wow.
And so I never even had to pitch it. I got an inquiry from Amazon, this new studio, and I'm sure someone there punched a couple keys on a computer and came up with my book sales, and they said, okay, there's a built-in audience here. And Amazon looks at itself as a store, so we're selling his books in this part of the store, and those people might want to come over here to our TV side. And so I think there was that kind of thinking that went on, and I got invited to a lunch to talk about this, and I kind of was trying to sell it, and the Amazon guy said, look, you don't have to sell it. I already want to buy it. So, it went from there. And then the added great thing was, like I said, they were new at this. And like the people they hired to run their studio came from other studios and so forth. So these people had experience,
Yeah.
but the mothership didn't. And the message was, let these people do what they do. This guy writes good books. Let him try to create a TV show. And so we were really left alone to, I was smart enough to say, I can't do it. I don't have that experience, but I know this guy, Eric Overmyer. I've known him for a while. And, he's worked on Treme, he's worked on Homicide, Life on the Streets. This guy has the pedigree that I think he should be the guy who puts this together. So no one said no, or no one said you got to interview that person or that person. They said, great, go with God. And that was kind of the message all the way. So we put this show together without any interference from the mothership, and I think that's part of the success that we
Fantastic.
were able to do what we wanted to do, and they trusted us. That's what it was about. They trusted.
Yeah. We talk to a lot of authors every week, and bestsellers like yourself, and we inevitably go towards, talk about the protagonist and the importance and, some of these bigger than life characters. But something that really stands out in your work is the supporting characters. Longtime readers always perk up when they hear Maggie McPherce, Bullet, Crate. Does that happen by accident for you, or are you purposeful in when you're constructing these supporting characters that kind of seem larger than life as well?
I guess I'm pretty purposeful. I mean, I've learned a lot along the way. And the basic lesson is that there's no throwaway characters, especially as I got into writing a few books and I realized that idea that it's all mosaic, that all these stories are moving along the same path or plane. So I took care with a lot of the characters because I always thought, maybe there'll be a Maggie McPherce book, maybe, and so I try to, as much as I can. I mean, it's like spinning plates. You have all these sticks, all these plates, and obviously the biggest plate is your protagonist. But the act kind of sours if one of the plates crashes. So you've got to keep all these plates in the air spinning, and those are all the characters, and so they're all important. I can't remember like the moment I was like, oh, of course, all the characters matter. It kind of comes to you as you, I guess, mature as a writer. The more you do it, the more you come to know that if I want to sustain this guy Harry Bosch over a number of books and a number of years, one way to do it is to surround him with interesting people.
Sure.
Harry's pretty old in the tooth. He ages in real time. So I think one of the best things I ever did, well, the two best things I ever did to sustain the series was have his daughter move home with him. Mm-hmm. So he had to raise a daughter, and so I had to make her interesting and have her have issues and so forth. And I think that kept the series going for a while. And then the next thing was him joining forces with Ballard. Mm-hmm. She's an interesting character, and she can handle half the book, and he can handle the other half. And so a lot of that is me realizing this is a way to sustain characters by putting them with people that readers will want to know about.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to shift gears a little bit. Almost concurrent with the release of this book is the release of season 2 of Murder Book. It's been out a few weeks, or it started a few weeks ago. And this year is The Women Who Stopped Sam Little. And you detail the investigation of the most prolific serial killer in America. Can you share the meaning behind the title and tell us who those women are?
Yeah, I mean, Sam Little claims to have killed 93 people over 4 plus decades. And more than half of those cases have been confirmed, and no one's really doubting him. The FBI has called him the most prolific serial killer in American history. And so it's gotten a lot of attention. He's been on 60 Minutes. His last count that I know of there's been 4 documentaries on him. But all these focus on his confessions. He decided to confess once he was convicted of 2 murders. And he exhausted his appeals, and he knew there's no future. My future is in prison. And so he decided, like a lot of serial sociopath killers, he decided to get attention by basically bragging about what he did. And that's what has drawn all this attention to him. And it just so happens I am pretty close friends with the detective who hunted him down and got him for those 2 murders. Wow. And I know the female prosecutor who convicted him of those 2 murders. And I knew there were victims that got away from him, female victims who got away from him and were key in their testifying against him and convicting him. And so it did seem like, to me, not really knowing a whole lot about the case, that it was a bunch of women that finally put an end to this horrible scourge that was Sam Little that got him behind bars. And even though I'd seen documentaries and I watched 60 Minutes, I wasn't seeing them get the credit they deserved. It was all about this Texas Ranger who got him to confess. And they don't even mention that the female detective who brought Sam Little to justice was in the next room coaching him. She got no credit. It just bothered the hell out of me. And this detective's name is Mitzi Roberts, and she's the character I based Renee Ballard on, the detective I've been writing about in recent years. And so this podcast really kind of started out of me feeling something is unfair here. And so I approached her, and the LAPD is a pretty famous police department, and they have their vanity and they have their pride, and it wasn't. And Missy Roberts is so unprepossessing. She never complained about this at all, but her supervisor said, what the hell, 60 Minutes? You don't even mention the LAPD. Yeah, we caught this guy, and I'm not exaggerating. 60 Minutes didn't mention LAPD, let alone Missy Roberts. He just didn't mention. One of the documentaries on the Oxygen Channel, I think it was, didn't mention the LAPD. So these so-called documentaries kind of act as though this guy just landed in prison and decided to talk. And so I approached the LAPD and said, do you want to eat? Basically, I didn't say it in these words, but I basically presented to them, do you want to even the score? Do you want to tell the whole story? Because I knew it was a really long case, because I knew Mitzi Roberts back when she was investigating this case. In fact, when she was in Florida, I happened to be in Florida. I had dinner with her when she was working on this case 8 or 9 years ago. And so I think I, hit them on a nerve. And so I got their cooperation. And so I got a lot of the inside information and the recordings of interviews and so forth that took place during the investigation. So what my podcast is about the investigation, hunt, and capture and prosecution of Sam Little. And I don't think that's a story that's been told. And, I get to his confessions, but I don't even get to him confessing to episode 8. So that should show you.
Wow. I'm
spending 7 hours just telling you how they caught this guy so that he would realize that all hope is lost. And what do I have? What do I have left? I have my secrets, and I'll reveal them.
Yeah.
And, so I think it's an interesting story about a relentless detective. Everything that I think about Harry Bosch, being relentless, this idea that everybody counts or nobody counts, all of these things are embodied in this investigation that was led by Detective Missy Roberts of the LAPD.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because as I was listening to episode 4, which I think was Road Trip, Layla Johnson and Hilda Nelson heard from, and I know they've since passed, but they were 2 of his victims that survived. They were extremely brave, and in the way they affected the case. But for me, as I was listening to him, I was thinking, as I was listening to these 2 people, everybody counts or nobody counts, because at least one of them was a prostitute at one point. And I'm not sure.
Both were, yeah.
And but I just felt like that was a personification of this phrase that, we wear shirts and talk about and read about. But I want to know the origin of that phrase. When did everybody counts or nobody counts pop into Michael Connelly's brain?
It's weird. I can't answer that because it's receded into the mist. It wasn't when I put Harry Bosch together for the first book. It was not that phrase was not known to me. It first appears in the third book, and that's 25 years ago or so, and I just can't remember how I came up with it.
It's got to be something that you heard. I spent 20 years in law enforcement. It's got to be something you heard on the crime beat, or not heard of, but thought of, everybody.
Yeah, no, I mean, I knew detectives. As a reporter, I knew detectives. I could clearly see there were two kinds of homicide detectives: those that were emotionally connected and driven by that fire, and those who saw it as a skill. And, they were really good at what they did, but they had some way of leaving it behind when they went home at night. And then there were some that it was all consuming. And of course, it's more dangerous to be the woman or the man for whom it's all consuming.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to write about, someone who was risking themselves to do this. And it was those detectives that I knew in real life that were like that exhibited this idea that I don't care what this person did or what, what that circumstances of, they should not have ended up dead. And I'm gonna work this till I find out why and who and all that stuff. And that dedication is everybody counts or nobody counts. And somehow, at some point, I put it into the book. It wasn't like, oh, I got this saying, I'm gonna put it in the book here. I just wrote it into the book, and I think there was some feedback from some real detectives who read my books and said, you nailed it right there. That's it. Yeah. And that's when I started developing it as this phrase. So it's a weird thing that, as you say, you got the shirt, in the war room at the LAPD's, the Robbery Homicide Division. They have it painted on the wall at they have a homicide archive. It's painted over the door. It's become this phrase that connects with detectives, homicide detectives in particular, and police officers, and I just can't say exactly, where exactly it came from.
Well, hell, it should be a life philosophy for people outside of law enforcement as well. I mean, I think it pretty much sums up, if everybody followed this maxim, we wouldn't have any issues.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's gotten to that it comes out of my book, so I have to be a little bit humble about it and not be saying Biden, why not use this instead of ads? It's kind of awful, but
Michael, it's got to be pretty amazing that it's something that popped into your head, that it's become what it's become. That saying, it's got to be.
Gratifying. I mean, but I think it is at the root of what could solve a lot of the world's problems or this country's problems and divisions.
Yep.
If it's an ideal that's sometimes hard to live up to, but you have this detective Harry Bosch who's trying to do it, and hopefully that's inspiring to some.
Well, in addition to Detective Mitzi Roberts, each season of Murder Book features another of your longtime advisors from the force, Detective Rick Jackson. You've credited them for their advice and their input over most of your career. It must be gratifying to shine the spotlight on them a bit with this series.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's also one reason why the podcast was even invented in the first place. I've had 2 seasons, and I've come in kind of the same 3 detectives are involved in both seasons, but one's bigger in the first season, and another one's bigger in the second. And they just happen to be the ones that are the most helpful to me in terms of research for Harry Bosch and Renee Ballard. And they inspire me, and I think they are such good people that when podcasts were becoming popular, I was thinking this could be a way of not of doing more than representing them in fiction, but telling their real stories. And this was at the same time we kind of had that discussion about fake news and all that stuff. I was, you know, I hadn't been a journalist in 20 plus years. And I was thinking, like, I'd like to get back to telling true stories, but, you know, if I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a novel. So this kind of fell into my lap. This would be a good way to do it. And I think I have access to these people.
Yeah.
And so I could tell stories that maybe no one else could tell. And so the first season was about a Rick Jackson case that spanned, you know, 30 plus years. And, you know, kind of went from there.
Which, for our viewers, that's an extraordinary podcast. You need to listen to season 1 and then season 2. But the Telltale Bullet is, I just kept like, really? That happened? Really? That happened? I mean, I spent the entire time shaking my head. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, it's a slow burn case. It's like a real examination of, a deep examination, I think, of one case that just never ended until it finally ended. But it just went on and on. And to think the same detective was with it from 1989 till its conclusion a few years ago is pretty cool and pretty rare.
Yeah.
And then you add the fact that this is a guy who trusts me and will tell me the real story and what he knows and what he did. And, you know, having that kind of access was amazing. And, you know, a lot of it, the groundwork was laid by my books, luckily, that when I would go into the DA's office and want to talk to them and say, I want to record the whole trial, and, you know, I got no objection. I really kind of cut through a lot of stuff because my diplomat was kind of Harry Bosch. People who, the virtues of Harry Bosch, and me coming in said, I want to get this right. You know, I remember I had to go in to see the judge to get permission to record the trial, and so forth. And the guy had
that's pretty cool. That doesn't happen. Yeah, that doesn't happen. That's pretty cool.
Well, we've touched on Bosch, the TV series. How long did it take you to find Titus Welliver, the main actor? What convinced him? What convinced him he was the man to bring Harry to life?
It's funny. It took a long time and it took a short time. So we got this, you know, the go-ahead from this nascent studio, Amazon, to go ahead with the show, and you know, so you start getting schedules, and we basically got 6 weeks from the go-ahead to find Harry Bosch. We got 6 weeks, and then we were gonna, you know, start moving. We're gonna start prepping and filming. And so on the very first meeting, you know, we have casting directors, 2 ladies that are really fantastic. They had been casting directors on Mad Men, so so we actually went to the offices at Mad Men to meet with them and have preliminary discussions about who could be Harry Bosch. And they had put together, I think it was like 5 or 6 pages of names, of actors' names. And
Wow.
Just coincidentally, the week before, I had watched a show called Touch. It had Kiefer Sutherland in it. And it didn't last that long. It was his follow-up to 24. And I love 24, so I wanted to see the show. And the guest star in the pilot and the next episode was Titus Welliver, and he played a guy who had PTSD. And he just played it so well. You could tell he had all this inner turmoil without having to say, man, I have some inner turmoil. I have PTSD. He didn't have to say anything. He was able to project it. And I had earlier meetings with Eric Overmyer, who I mentioned as the showrunner, and he was saying, the guy in the books is so internal. We have to find someone who can project that. And that's our biggest task of everything we're going to do on the show is finding the right Harry Bosch, the guy who can who can show that he has internal baggage without having to say, hey, I have internal baggage. So I come into this meeting and I'm reading the 5 pages and there's all kinds of great actors on there, but Titus Welliver wasn't on there. And so I'm this guy, I came from the book world. I'm not a TV guy, and I'm like almost sweating thinking like, do I dare mention him? Maybe he's like a jerk no one wants to work with, and so I'm biding my time, and they're kind of going through the list, mentioning, giving short descriptions of this person's availability. This person, would have to get paid more because they're going to move them from New York, that kind of stuff, all this kind of stuff. And we were trying to winnow down the list to maybe 10 or 12 people that we would then take to the next level, maybe talk to and things like that. And so when we finally come to the end, they go, anyone else come to mind? And I hesitated. And I said, well, what do we think about Titus Welliver? And I said we, so I could spread that anger if people said, get him, he's a jerk or whatever. And they said, oh, we love him, but he's making a movie in Hong Kong, so he's not available during this 6 weeks that we have to cast. So it was like, that's too bad. I must have shown like, what a disappointment on my face or something, because they stayed with it and they kept checking with his people, and then we kept going. We talked to lots of actors. We auditioned some. We were mostly on the level of actors that don't audition. They've achieved a certain level of status or success that they don't have to audition. It's like, you want me, make me an offer. I'm not going to come in and read. I'm above that kind of thing. And we just weren't finding our Harry, and we were going near the end, and then we were actually talking about having to go to Amazon and saying we need to delay this process and put off the filming because we're not going to go forward with a secondary Harry Bosch. We're going to get the right Harry Bosch. And these were our discussions when the casting people said, we heard that Titus is coming back to LA this weekend because he has some kids and he hasn't seen his kids in a while. So he's coming back to see his kids and then he's going back to Hong Kong. And so we just said, you gotta see if he can come in. We don't care what time it is, Saturday, Sunday, whatever.
Yeah.
Just see if he'll come in and talk to us and see if we're right about him. Because it wasn't just me at that point. Others had checked out Titus on different things he had done and saw what I saw. So it was kind of like a group. 2 things were going on. We weren't finding Harry Bosch among the pool that we were dealing with, and people were kind of thinking, this guy could do it. And so that worked out, and he came in on a Saturday, and he wasn't one of these no audition guys. He came in and did a scene from the pilot, and he was jet lagged. He had gotten the scene and memorized it and rehearsed it on the plane from Hong Kong.
Jeez.
But even in that kind of condition, he was really good. And so we left we were on Sunset Boulevard at this place where they do casting. And he left, we thanked him, and there's 7 of us there from the show involved in the putting together the show. And as soon as he walked out, I held my tongue again. I know good acting. I know when acting inspires me.
Yeah.
But I don't know the minute levels of acting that people that are in this business have been in for years and years and years. So I didn't say anything, but one of our key producers goes, I think that was Harry Bosch. And then suddenly everyone goes, yes, that was Harry Bosch. And then they looked at me and I said, I think that's Harry Bosch. And so the guy like snapped his finger and says, go get him. Because he left. He was in the parking lot. They went in, got him and told him he had the job.
Oh man, I can't picture anybody else playing the character.
Oh,
I can't even fathom who else could do that.
He also narrates the books. I mean,
I know.
Yeah, he has a great voice.
Yeah.
It's just it was very fortuitous, and in my books, I don't describe Bosch a lot, probably over almost 30 years now. You could probably all add it up to like 10 pages of less description in all the books about him. So he's kind of an open book, but there are some descriptors and they don't really match him. But so I always say he doesn't necessarily look like the guy in the books, but on the inside, he looks just like him.
Absolutely.
And that's what he brings. And Eric was right. It was the most important decision we had to make. And, to this day, I just think we made we hit it out of the park with that.
Michael, do you think the casting folks were getting a vibe from you? Like all the other people that wrote it, that came in or were reading, you're like, Michael doesn't like him. He can't be.
No, I mean, now I would do that because now I'm 7 years into this and I have some experience and I would speak up more. I was very quiet on these. I wasn't the one who had to say, nah. It never got to me. Most of the people who had much more experience than me would scratch someone way before it got to me.
Well, I want to switch up a little bit if I can, Sean, real quick.
I was just going to say, I think from top down, it's the best cast show on television. I mean, I like.
We think so.
Yeah. Not a single actor on it. It's not phenomenal.
It's just amazing. Some of the people that come in and might do a small part. We're in our last season, so we've actually gone back over the other seasons and looked at who can we bring back. And so some of the people from the first season that were in one or two episodes but had key parts we've brought back for scenes in the last season, and it's a constant reminder of how well the show has been cast.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts of both the books and the television show is Harry and Maddie's relationship. It's been a roller coaster, but it feels extremely authentic, from her initial resistance to her father to following in his footsteps. And you talked about it before, how you brought her into his life. So Harry clearly has a lot of pride in her, but his job has taken him to some very dark places, and it's shown him the underbelly, and she's seen it. Do you think, as a character, do you think it bothers him that his own daughter now sees that stuff or may want to enter into that universe?
Yeah, I think it would. Just like, she happens to be the same age as my own daughter, so she's kind of modeled on my own daughter. But
Wow.
Maddie has experienced and seen far more than my daughter ever has. But I've often been in that situation. Like, how would I feel if this was my daughter? And, I'm always feeling bad because Maddie's had a tough life, even though she has moved into where she's protected by, like, who else would you want to have protecting you? Harry Bosch.
Yeah.
So on one hand, she has that, but at the same time, he dwells in the in the gray to dark parts of the world, and
and she's curious. She's curious about everything. She reads his case books, like the murder books.
Well, she's got the same genes.
Yeah.
I think, I firmly believe that saved the series in terms of the books, and kept it going, just because that relationship is definitely the heart of the books. And, I'm out on the road doing book tours and stuff before COVID and all that. And it would always come up in Q&A, like, why did you have to kill Eleanor? And I know that's a little bit of a spoiler, but that's a way back book.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it, there's something wrong with you. But it's not as simple as that, or it wasn't the shock value of killing her. It was like, I knew then to keep this going, I had to turn the series in a new direction. And so much of the first part of the series is about Harry feeling, I'm on this planet for a reason. I have a mission, and I have to put on metaphoric armor so no one can get to me. And that's how I proceeded. And I knew if I suddenly changed that and dropped this young girl into his life, he could be gotten to, and that changed everything about him. And that was a very conscious decision and plan. And, you know, Eleanor had to be sacrificed, but it wasn't just like a quick, like, oh, this will shock him if I kill her here.
Yeah.
Or like I was setting up the future of the series because I love writing the series and I had to find ways of making it fresh and changing it. So it was a key thing. And I think all these years later, the series is still pretty strong and is sustained a lot by that relationship.
Really?
So, Michael, last October, you released The Night Fire. Then in May, Fair Warning. Then in November, The Law of Innocence. The last 13 months have been kind of nuts. And after 35 books, a lot of authors sort of rest on their laurels, but you seem to be accelerating your, murder book, podcast, the Bosch series.
Easy.
3 books in 13 months.
I'm going to raise a drink to that, Sean.
Yeah, exactly. What's driving you at this point? Like, what do you feel like you're accelerating or just business as usual for you?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I think, not that I'm running out of time, but I think I decided a long time ago that I'm not going to be a guy who writes till I drop dead. I think there's going to be a point where I slow down and I might disappear for a while. And so I want to get a lot done before I do that. I have the best job on the planet. And so if you have that, why don't you do it? Why don't you savor it? Why don't you revere it? And so that's what I'm doing. And the other aspect is the more you do something, the better you get at it. So I think I'm better at it now. And that also is reflected in the time it takes me to write a story. The artificial thing is that in the middle of those 13 books is the Fair Warning, which is the Jack McAvoy book. And I've always written those fast. I've only written a few of them, but because he's my alter ego, he does what I did for a living. There's not a lot of contemplation. What would Harry Bosch say in this situation? There's no going to detectives and say, what would he do here? There's no going to a defense lawyer and saying, how would Mickey Haller, get this result? Yeah. So the research aspects of the book is really truncated with when I write about Jack McAvoy, because he does and says what I would do. And I don't, there's no like, what do I do? It just comes out of me. Mm-hmm. So I write those books very fast. And no one will notice this, but in the 3 prior books that he's in, those were all years where I published 2 books. And it was because I wrote The Poet and The Scarecrow, and The Narrows is somewhat of a sequel to one of those. I just wrote those books super fast. And that allowed me to do 2 books in 1 year.
Jealous.
Wow.
We're going to wrap up with what we call the lightning round. It's 2 quick questions from each of us. This is, as we like to say, our moms always say, think before you speak. This is the time where that's optional. These are quick off the cuff responses. I'll go first. Musso and Frank's and Dan Tana's have closed. You have to go out for a steak and a drink. Where are you going? In LA, I should say.
You can get to go from Dan Tana's, but Dan Tana's used to be run by a guy named Craig, and he started his own restaurant called Craig's, and it has very similar high quality steaks and things like that. So, and they're open, although I'm not going to a restaurant yet. I'm just being extra.
I should have said that this is my hypothetical. They've closed down forever.
Oh, forever.
And you have to. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have been more clear. This was my hypothetical.
And everything's open and the pandemic's over.
Yeah.
Oh, life is good.
Where are you going for a steak?
I might have to move to another city, but in LA, I would still go to Craig's, or I'd go to a place called Mozza, which is an Italian restaurant.
Amen.
They have a fantastic steak there. That when I often go there, I'll get an appetizer that is pasta, but I'll always get the steak there.
Nice.
Right. And then my next question, this is a tough one probably. Harry's best partner / collaborator in all of your books.
I think it's got to be Ballard, because I think the age difference and Hershey's kind of exceeds to him that he's the mentor, puts him in, it feeds his ego. And I think it's a situation where they work best together and get the best results.
All right.
I would agree with
Pretty
that.
cool.
I think she's his equal in a lot of ways.
So, Michael, I'm a East Coast guy. I was in the New York City field office for the Secret Service for a number of years, and I know you're an LAPD LA guy. But if Harry Bosch was transferred to the NYPD, like Die Hard, what precinct or borough? Which borough would he be dropped into, or which wouldn't he want to work in?
I think he might go for Brooklyn. Stay away from Manhattan as much as he can.
Yeah, I don't think he'd be Manhattan.
No,
guy.
I didn't.
Yeah, maybe Brooklyn.
I was telling the guys, I'm like, he'll probably say Bronx because there's a lot of stuff going on in Bronx or Brooklyn. Definitely.
I don't know New York that well. I had a place there for a while, but I don't feel like I'm competent enough to answer that question.
I dig it.
You answered it just fine.
This whole section is not about competence, but go ahead.
Not at all.
It's all
We're
show.
asking.
I'm your man.
So if you ever write a Secret Service agent into your stories, I spent a decade in the Secret Service. Can you name him after me?
I think you'd be third in line. I have two
Damn
good
it.
friends that are Secret Service agents.
I'll
And they've
send
already
you
asked
in a
me.
hat.
What is
Wait.
All right. Of all the actors on Bosch, who are you most like in real life, personality wise?
Oh, wow. You mean what they are like in real life?
In real life. I mean, the crew who they're on film. Who are you most like in real life, personality wise?
I probably should say Titus. And we're very close.
Yeah.
And he's pretty quiet, when he's not performing. And I think I'm performing now, and I'm pretty quiet otherwise.
Okay.
I should say him, but I really think that Gregory Scott Cummings, who's Crate of the Crate and Barrel.
Yeah.
Green Barrel.
I end up talking to him a lot on the set, and we kind of have the same kind of worldview, and he has this kind of sardonic look at the world that I subscribe to. So maybe him.
Okay.
That's awesome.
All right. So the last question here. If you were placed in charge of the world's publishing, what's the first industry norm that you would change?
I think I'd move him out of New York. It's so New York centric that I think it inhibits it somewhat, in terms of what they think people want.
Sure.
All the way down the line to things like I remember, like, people in New York deciding what my book tours would be like, and they'd have me hitting two places in LA an hour apart, not knowing by traffic that's about a 3-hour drive. So it's very New York centric. They don't look too far beyond the Hudson River, and I would try to decentralize it a little bit, like have some offices in Chicago and LA, some editors in Chicago and LA, Seattle, that kind of thing. Spread it out a little bit. And, because they produce a product for the world, but it's too centrally located.
Right. All right.
Well, sir, you have survived the crew reviews crucible of the lightning round. I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and talking about a fraction of your career. Because as I told the guys, we could stay here for 4 hours, and I'd have enough questions for that much. But wrong side. This is a great book.
We loved it.
For you Lincoln Lawyer fans or new to Michael Connelly or just Bosch fans, pick up The Law of Innocence. It's excellent. It's a courtroom thriller where the twists are right in front of your eyes, and you don't see them till they happen. But Great stuff. We're huge fans of the TV show. We're fans of all you do. And again, we want to thank you for spending time with us.
Thanks for your interest. I really appreciate being on.
Good
Cheers,
to have
sir.
you on. Cheers.
Every guest counts or no guest counts. But tonight's guest, Michael Connelly, counted big time with us. We want to thank him for spending all the time with us talking about his new book, The Law of Innocence, featuring the Lincoln lawyer Mickey Holler. You know him from Bosch. You know him from Jack McAvoy. 35 books. If you haven't read them, get your ass in gear. We'll see you next Monday on the Crew Reviews.
How dare you do that in one take? Cheers.
Spilling my oats, boys.
This is the outro
Oh my gosh,
from
dude!
Michael Connelly.
Did you
How
see in the
the
last
hell?
one? Wait! Hold on! Did you see in the last one? Somebody made fun of those Sasquatch.
I know.
You sure?
That was good. And you know what? The whole point of that shirt is to be made fun of. That's the whole purpose.
Was it one of your buddies?
Yeah. Yeah. Did you
No,
know that?
I don't know who it was.
Oh, no. I thought somebody was just
No. I saw it. I was like, I love it. I was like,
that shot.
bring it, baby.
That shirt
And-
worked exactly as prescribed.
What shirt are you wearing today? Now, show that big. Show it. What is it?
Oh,
Everybody counts or nobody counts. What if you can't count?
one. Two. No. Two.
I haven't thought about my outro at all, as usual. So
That's good.
Oh my gosh, dude!
Because
I gotta
this is
feed
the
the
outro for Michael Connelly. And I can't believe he was on our program. And this
Who?
is Sean. And he looks prepared
No,
as usual.
never.
And
Yeah. That's not right. We need Sean Cameron outros. Do it again. No, I'm serious. Do that again.
this is like the most shocking episode.
I'm so.
I'm not screwing.
I'm embarrassed for everybody.
We're sorry, fans.
Sorry.
We know you were
I know
expecting
you-
more out of Sean.
Tune
Cameron.
in after the show to see
Sorry to
the
let-
meltdowns.
Sorry to let my fans, both of you, down.